Foldback testing, foldback testing, foldback testing, foldback testing, foldback testing, foldback testing, foldback. This is the Andrew Lake Podcast, and in this episode, we're talking about contradictions. I sincerely hope you enjoy. A contradiction is two things that cannot both exist at the same time. Does that sound familiar? Do any examples come to mind? Does the word paradox spring to mind? Because of course a paradox is two things that can't exist together and also can't exist without each other. I think possibly the single most powerful concept that I've come across in developing open-mindedness is overcoming this idea of contradictions. The concept is that there are no contradictions. There is no such thing as a contradiction. So let's talk about this. Let's think this through. Let's dissect, analyze, and intellectualize this concept of contradictions. A contradiction is two things that can't exist, two forms of truth, which one means the other is wrong. This can be a concept, it can be an idea, it can be a rightness, it can be a morality, it can be a course of actions, it can be usually something in the world of words and conversations and speech. It's quite rare that we say there's a contradiction in objects. Because if we can look at something and point our finger at it, then we don't say that it is a contradiction. If you go into the jungle, you see a hungry lion and a fully stuffed elephant full of food, then you don't say hunger and fullness, or satisfaction in the food realm, is a contradiction of things. And you don't really call it a paradox either, even though hunger and satisfaction are really a paradox. They could be defined as each other as opposites. They could define each other as opposites, if you wanted to think of it in that way. Usually, a contradiction in words or concepts occurs when we have two things that are based on different axiomatic presuppositions. So this term, axiomatic presuppositions, is probably one of our favourite phrases from everyone's favourite public intellectual Jordan Peterson, and it's really just a fancy way of saying your assumptions. So your axiomatic presuppositions are your working assumptions, the things you assume so that you can get off on a foot. It might be that when you realize comparing ideas depends on a set of axiomatic presuppositions, you realize that you can't have a full comparison of something. You can't say that one thing is in contradiction to another, because you'll find that each thing that is in contradiction is based on different axiomatic presuppositions. You might also find that if you dig deep enough into it, everything is based on a set of assumptions. When you really get down into why it is you think something is the way that it is, you believe it because you have underlying assumptions. It takes quite a heavy amount of introspection to find these assumptions for yourself. More often, it's the case that you are talking with someone else, or someone challenges your assumptions and they are revealed to you that way. To actually find them for yourself within yourself takes a heavy amount of introspection and brutal self-honesty. So it's much more common to be jarring our assumptions with other people in our conversations, which is why we say that's a contradiction. That doesn't make sense. That can't be true. Because you're holding assumptions that are different to someone else. They're holding a set of assumptions and they can't both work together. And that's when you know that you're working in a contradiction. There is a great critic of the scientific philosophy or the mechanics of science and reason called Rupert Sheldrake. He's written this book called The Science Delusion, perhaps in a way of combating against this God delusion book that Richard Dawkins has written. So we've got the God delusion, which is a truth based on a set of axiomatic presuppositions or assumptions. So if you hold on a bunch of assumptions, you can prove that God exists. God does exist within that. And then the same thing happens with science and reason. This is what Sheldrake is pointing out, is that the reason of science is just the same as God and religion, in that they're based on a set of presuppositions. You have a base of assumptions, a set of assumptions, and if you hold these assumptions, you will have science, you will have reason. And the quote goes something like, "Give us one free miracle, and from there the entire thing will proceed with a seamless, casual explanation." And that's his way of pointing out that science can explain a hell of a lot of things if you just take on that one assumption. So what are we to do? It appears that everything is groundless. It appears that nothing exists. I think one of the common intuitions to responding to this information, of learning that everything is based on assumptions, is to realize that nothing can be true. Nothing can be real. Because you can prove any truth. You can prove any reality. But this is a mistake because it doesn't understand the difference between relative truth and ultimate truth. And this is just one of the things that we can use to resolve this problem of contradictions. And this is how we can hold contradictions and understand contradictions. Open up our minds, allow for more concepts, be cognitively open, linguistically open, conceptually open, and allow for contradictions to happen as a strategy, as a concept unto itself. Holding contradictions is one of the most powerful tools that you can use for navigating the relative space. So, before we go any further, I want to be absolutely clear about putting out this difference between relative truth and ultimate truth, because this is fundamental to everything. This is one of the most important understandings in all philosophy, religion, science, psychology, everything. This is a grand meta concept that you need underpinning everything that you do. And it will help with sorting out all of your misunderstandings, all of your misconceptions, all the ways in which you navigate contradictions, the ways you find truth, the ways you believe truth, the way you hold things to be true and not true. So let's get this absolutely clear that there are two kinds of truth: relative truth and ultimate truth. So this is what we're working on. The definition in our minds that we have of relative truth, and the definition in our mind when we say ultimate truth. So when I say each of those phrases, distinctly different things need to come to mind. When you hear those words, when you hear that word relative truth, you need to have a different set of understandings than when I say the words ultimate truth. So relative truth is all the things we say are true based on assumptions. And in that world, contradictions do exist. There is such thing as a contradiction in the relative world. So it's very important to understand that contradictions do exist in one way. If you are to say something is true, and then say the assumptions you need for that to be true are also true, then you are working within your rules of relative truth. You are functioning within relative truth, you're playing by the rules, you're doing as you're told, and the structure of relative truth works. And it's very true that there are contradictions. And it's true that there are contradictions within that world, because each set of assumptions can lead to different kinds of truths. And it's fair to say that there are some things that are more true than others within the relative world. Because with each set of assumptions, you're going to have different manifestations. You're going to have different concepts, different ideas coming out of them. And the best truth, or the best explanation for how these assumptions work, is what we're going to call true. Ken Wilber, the pioneer of integral theory, and the old mate that first brought this idea of ultimate truth and relative truth to my attention, likes to use the example of Hamlet to explain this idea of relative truth and ultimate truth. So the question is this play by Shakespeare, Hamlet, about have a nice day? Is that the message that this play is trying to give to the world? And in a relative sense, no. Because Hamlet exists within a culture, within a language, within a structure of concepts, within a structure of assumptions. And it's within a understanding that exists between a group of people that the purpose of the play, or the general message of that play, Hamlet, is not have a nice day. Now, if you are someone who likes to dream up crazy theories, or have some outlying idea about what Hamlet is, and you can construct for yourself an elaborate web of concepts that prove that Hamlet is about have a nice day, then you can operate within the ultimate truth, because if it's true for you, it may as well be true. And who's to say that Hamlet is not about have a nice day? That would be the ultimate truth to a person within their world that believes that truth. So relative truth is nested within a group of assumptions. And it's okay to operate within that world. Now, ultimate truth. Ultimate truth. Now, ultimate truth. This is both very simple to understand and also quite difficult to understand. So let me spell this out as simply as I can, and we can unpack it. Ultimate truth is anything that exists. This is very important to get your head around if you want to resolve all contradictions. So understand these words, that ultimate truth is anything that exists. if it exists in any form, way, shape, color, smell, taste, touch, concept, theory, place, time, size, direction, location, it exists as truth. Anything that is, in a sense. And that's why a lot of mystical teachers and grand theorizers about the nature of reality say things that sound so funny on the surface. They sound quite like a truism to say something like, everything that is. Or everything that exists has suchness. Or you are the I, you are the self, you are the ultimate self. You are the totality of existence. Things like that. If you want to come at it from a philosophical point of view, you can say that everything is one thing. And if you want to come at it from a experiential point of view, or a development of self-identity point of view, then you can say every experience is one thing, or your identity is what you identify to be. So it's quite hard to dance around this ultimate truth that everything that exists is true. And words don't really get at that very well. Words don't really express ultimate truth very well, because when I say everything, it's very hard for you to hold everything in your mind and have actually the literal meaning of everything come up in your mind. So words that are trying to get at ultimate truth usually fail, because reality is so vast and so epic and so big, and it has all these different dimensions to it and things that are making it up, that it's very weak for words to be describing ultimate truth. Which is why a lot of these mystics don't talk about truth. They don't talk about ultimate truth. If a student or a Zen student will ask about something like, what is the ultimate truth, or what is absolute truth, then the Zen master might just sit there. They might not say anything. It's quite a common fable of people to share that story of someone trying to impart ultimate truth to another person. So ultimate truth you can't escape, you can't get out of. It's always there. Like this very experience that you're having now is a part of ultimate truth. And it is total because it's only one thing. Now within ultimate truth, you're going to have things that seem like they shouldn't exist. You're going to have differing opinions. You're going to have different ideologies, different concepts, different truths, different relative truths within them. But you see, based on our definitions between ultimate truth and relative truth, ultimate truth can allow for contradictions. Because two things exist in the minds of two different people at the same time. So there's a contradiction that is a contradiction in relation to the two people, but in terms of the existence of everything, they both exist, so there is no contradiction. Really, if you can allow yourself to open up to ultimate truth, then you can be a lot more comfortable with contradictions, and you can allow them to dissolve. Some of the time what gurus and mystical teachers are doing is reducing relative truth to ultimate truth. This is why sometimes they can contradict themselves and be perfectly okay with it. It's important to keep in mind, though, that relative truth still has its point. It still has its purpose, and we can still use it. We still need to be able to say that something is true or not true, depending in a relative sense. And this is where we come to our layers or waves of complexity in how we explain things. So, in lines of development, or all the different things that develop within a human being, such as your linguistic cognition development, or your existential understanding development, or your interpersonal development, or your moral development, how you moralize, how you do things ethically and morally. These all have different waves of complexity. They have different levels to them. And this is how we can come at this ultimate truth, relative truth, from another angle. In a lot of lines of development, we can divide it into 3 main sections. Sometimes we divide it into many sections, but a lot of them, depending on the line, a lot of them can be put into generally 3 main stages of development. So the first stage would be pre-conventional. The second stage is conventional. And the third stage, you guessed it, is post-conventional. So we've got pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. And this occurs in many lines of development in many ways. So for pre-conventional development, there's not very much complexity. There's not very much nuance. There's no differentiation. Everything's really just taken on face value. Everything's taken as it comes. And solutions are come up with on the whim in the pre-conventional. Now, at conventional stages of development, things are a little bit more complex because the person has chosen between right and wrong. They've been presented with a bunch of options and they've chosen one. So at the conventional stage, at the pre-conventional stage, they're only using what they've got. They don't have options. At the conventional stage, they're choosing from a lot of options, and then they're saying that that only option is the only option. That one option is the best way of doing things. It's the only way of doing things. So it's rejecting all the other options. And that's the point where most people are at, because we all walk around thinking that the way we are doing things is the only way to do things. It is the proper way to do things. It's the best way to do things. And we've become aware of different options where we know that different things are possible. There are different ways of doing things, but those ways are wrong. Those ways are inadequate. And this is only the conventional way of, it's the conventional way of conceptualizing things. But then we have the post-conventional way of doing things. And this is where we take on a more complex way of looking at things, which is the ability to both include and exclude in a more nuanced way. So we've got our list of options and we can compare and choose each option depending on the situation. So at pre-conventional, you've only got one option. It's the only thing that you choose from. It's the list of things you choose from is one thing. You're impulsive. Your response is immediate. There's only one thing that you can come up with. And at conventional, you have a list of options and you choose one. You can only do one thing. And so you exclude all the options. You downplay all the options. You say the options are wrong. But at post-conventional, we have a list of options and you can use all options in different ways in different situations. So at each stage, there is a list of options of what to do. And at each stage, we have a way of responding to that list of options. And that is pre-conventional, conventional to post-conventional. So let's tie this in with our relative truth and our ultimate truth. So when you have relative truth and someone is operating within a set of presuppositions or set of assumptions and they're pre-conventional, that truth is the truth. It is the only truth. They're operating from that, and there's no other way to get out of it. Their concept of what's happening is the final truth, and there are no contradictions because it's the only thing they know of. Now, at conventional truth, we have the list of options, the list of truths, and we can see that there are different truths. We can see there are different ways of explaining things. There are different axiomatic presuppositions. There are different assumptions. And we reject certain assumptions. We reject certain truths. We've got a wider list to choose from, but we're still rejecting some and clinging to the one that we say is true. So we're swimming in this relative world, seeing that there are things that can be changed and adapted and malleable. Truths are malleable, but we're still clinging to one of them. We're still rejecting others. And if you can push through that, if you can swim around in the relative world long enough, what will happen is you'll burst through into this ultimate truth. Because if you swim in the relative truth long enough, you see the waves and you see that all the waves are part of the same ocean. And that's the waking up to ultimate truth. So when you have ultimate truth, you can pick and choose multiple truths. You can choose to accept many relative truths. And when you're accepting different relative truths, you are contradicting yourself in the relative world. But in the ultimate world, you are not contradicting yourself. So someone who has broken through to this post-conventional ultimate truth looks like a pre-conventional person to a conventional person. Because the conventional person is looking at this post-conventional person and saying, look, you're contradicting yourself. You can't believe that. You can't believe that. You need to choose one from your list of options. You're choosing multiple things from the list of options, so you're wrong. You're contradicting yourself. You must be like that other person who is down there, who's misunderstanding the list of options. You don't know what's happening with this list of options. But really, the post-conventional person is much more nuanced. They understand that there is a list. There's things that you can choose from. There's a set of presuppositions that you can play with. So be wary of pointing out contradictions in other people. Also, be absolutely aware of contradictions within yourself, because that's an indication that you need to open up to this relative truth. If there's a contradiction that doesn't sit right with you, it means you're using that form of the truth in the wrong way. So remember, even if you are post-conventional and understanding ultimate truth, you can still say things are not true. You can still say that Hamlet is not about have a nice day, when really you know that it can ultimately be that way to someone. We're still going to build up our relative truth. Relative truth has an important function in fleshing out the middle of our pyramid, if it were. If we have it on a pyramid, we can say, well, the tip of the top of the pyramid is ultimate truth, and the flat surface floor of the pyramid is pre-conventional truth. Then everything in between is that relative truth that depends on the bricks. So that everything in the middle of a pyramid depends on the tip and of the base. It's not a pyramid without both those things. The middle, the top, and the bottom. All three of those things. Understanding this difference between ultimate truth and relative truth, and being aware that these different layers of pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional interpretation can really open up the whole way of seeing the world, your whole way of understanding information. Because when you know that there is no such thing as contradictions, you start to take on more information. It's really the start of accelerated learning, because conventional learning or pre-conventional learning has this idea that there's a truth to be learnt and you need to learn about it. And things that are not true, you should not learn about. So you should only be learning about truth. And that's a very pre-conventional sort of way of approaching learning. So a conventional way is very similar in that it has its options of learning, it has its things that it learns, but it still thinks there's only one thing you should be learning, and you should reject the other things. So the other things might be okay for some people, but really you should just be learning the truth. The truth seeker is strong at this stage. They want to know the truth, and they want to reject not truth. So someone who is very big on finding truth, on learning the truth and learning what's real, is really only at the conventional stage, because they still have this idea that there is truth in a ultimate sense, but they're in the relative world, and there is non-truth. But they don't understand this post-conventional way of learning, which is that everything is true and everything makes up a part of the whole, and they don't have this ultimate truth in mind. They don't have a deeper understanding of what truth is. So learning is an interesting skewer for our pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. And learning really opens up when you let go of these contradictions and you forget about worrying what's true and what's not, and just be comfortable with taking on new information. Any information you receive is only going to broaden your paradigm. It's only going to more complexify your perspective. So this is when accelerated learning starts, because you learn or you realize that more information is better. More models, more systems, more sets of presuppositions, more different views on reality, more beliefs, more ways of seeing things. And that's when you start to become interested in everything. You start to open up and want to hear about different people's opinions. You want to take on different people's opinions. You want to try people's ideas. You want to find new things. And you really just expand and expand until you're into this big ball of understanding, this big ball of concepts and thoughts and ideas and theories. And it really just, it's a beautiful way to break through. It's just an incredible concept. The dissolving of contradictions. And it just helps with the way you feel about things. If you can feel comfortable in knowing that it's okay to hold contradictions, well, that's just a relief, isn't it? It's okay to let things go. It's okay for things to be in contradiction to each other. And really, that's what we're after, isn't it? To be okay with the world, to be okay with your life, to feel okay. How about that for a kick-ass goal or a kick-ass point to conceptualizing and philosophizing and intellectualizing? All this mental activity can actually lead to feeling okay with being alive, feeling good about being alive, and being deeply content with your place in existence. And it's not a surface level thing. It's a really deep core level thing. It's not like someone asks you, oh, how's your day? And you go, yeah, sure, it's good. Yeah, not bad. That's a surface level thing. I'm talking about a deep, profound, powerful way of being content in the world. And I really think the dissolving of contradictions is one of the ways we can get there. Thanks very much for tuning in. Check out more of Ken Wilber if you'd like to know more about relative truth and ultimate truth. He's just an incredible theorist that everyone should know about. Thanks very much for tuning in, and we'll be back soon with more. Have a terribly beautiful day. Is that a contradiction?
This world goes over my head. I can't keep up with what's being